week, we watched American Fiction, directed and written by Cord Jefferson.
Thought it was an amazing movie. I was interested in it before when the initial trailers and stuff were coming out, and I found it more apropos after last week watching FD's video on this kind of same subject matter and topic. So I thought it was very funny that I watched it right after that. But yeah, I loved the project. Though this movie hits on a lot of themes and topics, I do think things that we've discussed personally in this circle of this podcast and it led to the creation of this podcast and talking about movies and stuff. But yeah, I enjoyed like every minute of it.
I think that there are two storylines of one, a man writing what he thinks Black audiences want, really out of necessity of money, and also being a caretaker for his aging mother, were beautifully woven together. It was incredibly personal to me, I guess, in my current situation, but also just like any Black artist, I feel like can totally relate to everything that this movie is saying.
The satire of how Hollywood and white liberals tend to view Black culture, like they love the auspices of Black culture, but not the actual Black people. It kind of does hammer the point perfectly home at the end when they're talking about selecting the book for the award, and the white lady's like, "Oh, some it's important. I think sometimes we have to listen to Black voices." When the two Black authors like, "This book is trash. We don't want it. We don't like it." I love subject matter like that. It reminded me of like a couple years ago. You have like Nancy Pelosi and all the other senators wearing scarves. Wearing scarves and kneeling down in honor of Juneteenth or whatever, those kind of performative white gestures that white people think makes them allies when that kind of behavior doesn't, and intermingles with all this racial gymnastics on perception.
Mhm.
There is a love story in it with their, I guess, their house helper and the neighborhood security guard, which I did like as well.
How do we as Black people make art, right? That is true to our experiences, that don't fall into stereotypes, but how will that be received by wider audiences, like people who might not just be Black and who are like interacting with the work? Because the thing that I loved the most, which is interesting because I had friends who had watched this and they said they loved the movie, but they didn't like the ending.
Mm.
I felt like the ending was really good because it doesn't answer certain questions that I think it does pose, because there aren't any concrete answers to those questions yet. Do you stop making the slavery movies, the movies, the eighth movie about Martin Luther King Jr., like, and do you make a movie like Get Out or Moonlight or something like that, where you're like telling new stories about, what has already been happening in the Black culture, but hasn't really been kind of shown to wider audiences? Like, how do you split the difference? I feel like it is very complicated
Yeah.
because it's like, if people don't know the history of a certain Black figure who did all these wonderful things, isn't it our duty to showcase that story? But if the media that everyone is consuming is just about the Black struggle and overcoming those struggles, even though, a lot of those things still have not been overcome, do you want to keep showing that as the definitive kind of perspective of like what the Black experience is? Because if you're trying to do something different, then you should, like, we need those stories too. And I think, I don't know, I guess my personal opinion is that sometimes those stories are a little bit more important just because it gives people a much more broader sense of like who we are. Um, because we already know what the perspective is. We already know what the stereotypes are. We already know what that is. We've seen that multiple times throughout the years. So, not that those things aren't valuable, but we also need a more expansive look at who we are.
I wish Tracy Ellis Ross's character got a little bit more time, because I did love hearing uh both Jeffrey Wright's character and hers and Sterling K. Brown talking about the upbringing as kids. I can kind of understand that archetype of three siblings, and I feel like Tracy reminds me a lot like their dynamic is Tracy kind of bounces between the two. It also showcases how certain children have different experiences with their parents, and their interpretation of their parents are drastically different as well.
I totally agree that I did not like the fact that Tracy Ellis Ross dies in the first like 30 minutes. I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Why? Like, I mean, I guess it is based on a book, so I guess that had to happen. But like, I was waiting for her to be a part of this whole thing. With that said, Sterling K. Brown, star of the show, like literally every scene he was in, he ate it up. Like it was so good. But yeah, it's so true to what you're saying of like how each kid experiences that either their parents or their childhood in very different ways. So I was sad when she left because I did feel like there was like a missing piece to that family dynamic and that missing perspective that I definitely wanted to see more of, because it seems like before Monk comes back home, she is taking care of the mom exclusively.
Mhm.
Sterling K. Brown's character of Cliff is not even around. He's going through his own situation, and that's kind of what happens as you become adults. Everyone kind of goes off and lives their own lives, but then your parents get older, and then you have to figure that out. Like, how are you gonna all take care of your aging parents? In the beginning, he doesn't even want to go back home. Like, he doesn't want to deal with his family, and then he ends up being the main caretaker. And that really was like, I don't know, that kind of hit me. I was like, yeah, that's true. It's like somehow you end up being the person doing it.
They're talking. He's like, "What should we do?" He's like, "You can make the choice. You're the oldest one here. You make the decision." And he's like, "Oh, I wasn't aware that you're paying for everything, even with your divorce and losing half your income in a divorce. You're taking care of everything." He was in for a shock. Like both the other brother was in Tucson, living enough, discovering his self identity as a gay man now. He's there in L.A. Teaching and writing and pissing off once again young white liberals who gets mad at seeing the N word on the chalkboard, and she can't disassociate the lesson that's being taught. She's like,
Mhm.
I don't like that word. It's bad. It's like if I got over it as a black man in this context, you can get over it as well. As well. He's dealing with all that so disconnected from what's going on at home, and I think that's why he always viewed being home as, like we said, because our perceptions of our parents and our upbringing is different. That's why he always viewed home as a negative thing for him, because he like the mother says it, and like you don't know how to. You're just like your father. You don't know how to connect with people on a certain way. So
Mm.
that's why home was always hell. After the helper's wedding, he's like him and his brother talking. He was like, I've been getting angry a lot. I feel like I'm like dad. Like he's realizing as much as his
Mm.
affection for his father, he has picked up his negative traits. As we get older, we're suddenly become cognizant that we are literally copycatting our parents. And sometimes we decide to actively rebel against it and do better, like depending on your influence of your parents. Sometimes they say, I'm going to improve it, or you were a good example, I don't mind imitating you. And I think that's also the battle he's dealing with as far as his empathy.
It was like a coming of age story, but for an adult. And I
Yeah.
think that I love stories like that
Yeah.
because it shows that you're always growing. Like that you don't reach a point where you have everything figured out.
This picture, this novel really hits at a lot of things. Like the subject matter and the content in it is just so enormous.
It's getting praised for all the right reasons because this movie really is exceptional. I do think it's one of the best that came out last year.
And I think you kind of hit the underlying theme of the movie is empathy, humanity. Like, of course, the white liberal not being identified to the black experience only because they've only seen one aspect of the black experience. That in itself is the only black experience, that there is. They can't see the humanity in black people beyond that identity. You know, empathizing with your siblings, with your parents, like you said, like reconnecting with your family. Like there are times where I'll just randomly like bust up in my sister's room and just hug her, and then she'll pinch me like we're five, like things like that.
This movie was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, which is so amazing. And Sterling K. Brown got, I think, his first Oscar nomination. Overdue. He has been
Yeah,
killing it for years. Like he is just such a phenomenal actor.
yeah.
Like
Jeffrey's in it for best actor. He's in it, and Sterling K. Brown's in it for best supporting actor.
amazing.
Yeah, amazing. And these are
I'm so
two
proud.
people who have had long careers. We've been singing his praises in those
Praise
kind
it
of roles like
forever.
forever. Like we'll talk about Waves forever. This is one of those movies that is just like Waves that I can vibe with so much.
So yeah, I'm really glad that this movie is getting the acknowledgement it deserves because it's just so fantastic.
Did you like that clip? Well, you can listen to the entire podcast because the 16mm Film Crew podcast is available on all major podcast platforms.